setting yourself up in the correct type of entity, spend the time, spend the money, talk to your accountant, figure out what the best way is for what it is that you're doing in your circumstances, and get it right from day one.
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are, back again, back to our favourite time of the week.
That's it, Andrew. Back again, coming over the airwaves and the video waves.
No, it doesn't work. Wi-Fi waves.
Yeah, something like that. To everybody, talking to them about a whole range of different things across our, call it our profession, our skill set, financial advice.
Yep.
Today, a little bit different.
Yeah.
Haven't done this one before.
No, so today we're talking all about side hustles. So talking about, when do you turn that side hustle and how do you turn that side hustle into a business? We've all seen it, many times before where someone has a side hustle and, they decide, I need to devote 100% time and attention to it. It's time to, quit the day job. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what you should be considering, some of the things to, help make that transition successful.
Yeah, no, absolutely love it. And I think probably now more than any other time in history, this is more of a reality for more people than it ever has at any previous point in time.
It's the generation of entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Well, it's definitely that, but I think it's the technology and the way that we work has allowed us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And, what's it called? The laptop lifestyle. So if you can get to that, I mean, there's ideas that, that conjure up in my mind that people love that sort of sitting somewhere nice and warm on a beach, just chucking in a few hours worth of work and going surfing for the rest of the day or whatever it is that ticks your box for you. But no, let's Andrew, let's start to unpack it. What are some of the things that we think about around sort of side hustles and then turning that into a profession or a fully fledged business where it's taking, all of your time and attention?
Yeah, I mein, look, and this is maybe contrary to, what some of the gurus out there will say, that you need to devote, if you're going to make a successful business, you need to devote 100% time and attention to it. You need to make sure that you live and breathe it and, are willing to sacrifice whatever it is that you're willing to sacrifice for it. And while I agree with the concept, I think that the biggest thing is you need to validate first before you quit your day job. Have proven demand, have some consistency in income, have some validation from the market that what you're putting out there is going to have an element of success. And the reason, one, there's the obvious reason of, you quit your day job too early, you can't replace that income, and all of a sudden you're, either racking up credit card bills or you're needing to go back to work. But for me, the biggest thing with it is if you do decide to quit your day job, you don't have that, consistency in income coming in. And now naturally the income that you're likely to generate off a side hustle when you're working part-time or after hours or, only devoting a small fraction of your attention is always going to be lower or should be lower than than what it will generate once, you're full-time in it.
Yep.
But you're almost, the thing that you're doing when you quit your day job, if you don't have that consistency in income, is you're putting a stopwatch on that business and that side hustle.
Yeah.
There's now a ticking clock that's saying, hey, if you don't generate enough income, by X.
When you run out of money.
Yeah, either when you run out of money or when you run out of credit facility, which is the other thing that you definitely do not want to do. But you're also, while you're, devoting 100% time and attention into that business, you're now putting a time limit onto, how long you can give that side hustle to be successful.
Yeah. Look, I completely agree with that sentiment. Probably the only thing that I want to add to it is more so the motivation piece for people wanting to start their own business. Because if you're in a position where you don't necessarily enjoy what you do for work and you've got this idea of starting a side hustle, you're probably approaching it from the wrong position, going, okay, for me, this is the out, this is the escape of my day to day. So you don't necessarily critically analyze the environment, the position. It's just like, I'm going to do it because I want to get out of this thing. And then what ends up happening is, you're going at this thing. Maybe you haven't validated the idea. Maybe you haven't tested the market. Maybe you haven't done any of these things. And then you get there, you get rid of your career or whatever it may be. You go and spend 6, 9, 12 months chasing this thing. You consume and burn all of your savings to try and support you during that time, given there's still benefit and merit in giving it a go and not dying wondering. But I think you can be a little bit smarter about it, even if that is your motivation, with some of those things that you were talking about. But test that out. And with the technology that we've got available, especially with all of the tools that are becoming online now with AI, you can multiply your output quite significantly, better than any point in time that you have previously. And I think that's critical, because if you're devoting 8 to 10 hours a day with your work, your day job, call it, you can then spend 3-4 hours per night or, the same day on that new job or on that new business, on that side hustle, but you can multiply your output because of these tools. So you can get further faster than what we have been able to do any other time in history.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's not quit. Maybe it's, you're going part-time. Maybe you can do 3 days a week in your job. Maybe you can do 4 days a week in your job. Maybe you can do, something to slow down the consistency in income as you build up the business, if that's possible and if that's something that you can do. But over to something, from a finance perspective, one of the things that you do want to potentially, not potentially, you definitely want to be able to do is separate your personal and your business finances. All too often, a side hustle is all paid from the same account, trying to distinguish what's a tax deductible expense and a non-tax deductible expense, and, not knowing where things ultimately lie or even how much you've spent in the business is probably mistake number one. But separate your personal finances and your business finances and create a clear delineation between the two of them. One, to be able to, understand your tax obligations and where things are going to lie from a expense side of things. But two, to create those habits earlier on. Because even with successful businesses and even with larger businesses, seen it many times. It's all of a sudden personal assets are coming out of business assets and it's a mess.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And interestingly that you mentioned that tax one, because that was the one that I was going to talk about. But make sure that when you are doing this, that you understand what your tax obligation is. As an employee, you get the luxury that the tax is paid on your behalf through your employer, through the payroll system. Whereas when you start working for yourself, that obligation falls on you. Depending on what your turnover is, you're going to start collecting GST as well. And if you're not careful about how you manage that, you might see all of this money in your bank account and go, fantastic, the business is doing well. And you might take that out to deploy it somewhere else or spend it or what have you. And all of a sudden it comes time to lodging your quarterly BAS or your taxes at the end of the year. And it's like, all of a sudden I've got this tax bill and tax liability. Oh, geez, where am I going to get this money from? So if you can get that structure set up earlier, it will hold you, similar to what you were talking about before about your personal and business expenses and accounts. If you can separate those, and every time that you get in your income, you're stripping some aside to allow for the tax that you're going to have to pay in the future, definitely the way to go, because we've seen so many people get caught out with it. And I must say, of late, just in terms of talking to all of our accounting friends out there, the ATO nowhere near as lenient as what they have previously been in the past. They're a lot more aggressive around collections. They're a lot less lenient on organising payment plans, because realistically, people are using and abusing that privilege and using the ATO as a lender, as a facility to try and help them smooth out and manage their cash flow.
Yeah, exactly right. So learn early on. I mean, learn when you need to start withholding GST. Learn, what an APN is. Learn, your PAYG installments, your deductible expenses. I mean, talk to your accountant and work closely with your accountant, because the accountant would and should also be discussing with you the right structure for your business and when you should be potentially even changing that structure. A lot of small businesses, a lot of side hustles are going to start off as a sole trader, which maybe it's fine, it's cheap, it's easy. You can get started on something like that. But once the complexity of the business starts to change, once things start to become, more larger in scale and more complex in how you're operating, you are going to need to start considering, okay, well, maybe a sole trader isn't giving me the asset protection that I need or the tax benefit that I need. Maybe I need to move into a company or a trust, and I need to discuss with my accountant, what are some of the risks? What are the tax consequences of making a move? And when is the right time to do it? Balancing out the costs associated with it with potentially some of the tax and risk benefits of moving into a different structure.
Yeah, look, we've spoken about this till the cows come home on previous episodes and things like that around getting the right structure for holding assets. Your business is no different. And similar to what we were saying previously, if you can, although costly to do and a little bit more complex, if you can get that structure correct at the start, it'll hold you in good stead for what that looks like moving forward. Because changing stuff after you've already gotten going is a pain in the neck. It's expensive, it's cumbersome, and it can be complex depending on your business operation. So I'd say the structure piece, setting yourself up in the correct type of entity, spend the time, spend the money, talk to your accountant, figure out what the best way is for what it is that you're doing in your circumstances, and get it right from day one.
Yeah. And I think when you're on that and when you're starting to plan for it, is making sure that you're also covering your bases in a few different areas, right? And so I'm going to summarize all of this in one sentence, and it's get advice.
Mm-hmm.
But on one aspect, you need to consider your insurances. So, if you've got income protection cover and you're moving to a more risky occupation, do you increase cover before you decide to move? Superannuation, are you going to be paying superannuation? Are you not going to be paying superannuation? If you're not, what are you going to do to make up that ground at a future point in time? What are your future needs? And what if, projecting forward a few years, what's some of the financial goals that you're wanting to tick off?
Mm-hmm.
And do you need to potentially bring some of those forward? So one example is, I saw a client just this week, and he's going to be transitioning in the business that he's operating from an employee to a director in that business. And opportunity of earnings is going to be significantly higher. But one of the things that him and his partner are looking at is purchasing property in the next 6 to 12 months. So the conversation was, okay, you make that transition to a business owner, and you are no longer an employee. Well, what impact is that going to have from the lending side of things? Are you going to be able to borrow in 6 or 12 months? The answer ultimately was no. And so it's, okay, do we actually, is it likely that income is going to be consistent? Because you also don't want to enter into a home loan and a borrowing arrangement if you're not going to have consistency in income. But you tick that box and you say, okay, well, do we actually bring that purchase forward a little bit, make sure that you can get borrowing from a bank at good interest rates and secure the property purchase, then transition into a business owner, and all of a sudden, as long as you're making repayments, everything's fine from the lending side of things. But doing that little bit of projection around, what does the next little bit look like, and what implications is what I'm doing now going to have on my future finances as well.
Yeah, and on the future finances part, I know you slipped in the part about are you going to be paying yourself superannuation. Time and time again, we see this. Don't do it. Continue to pay yourself superannuation. So let me just paint a picture that you start a business, you stop paying yourself super because, I don't need to do it and my business is my super. And then you spend 2 or 3 decades building up a business thinking that you're going to sail off into the sunset and that's going to provide the income for you when you're retired. And then all of a sudden the environment changes or you can't get the price that you want or something happens and the business is compromised. All of a sudden you've gone and lost 20 or 30 years of being able to invest for your future retirement. It's relatively speaking such a small amount. 12%, if you can tip in a little bit extra, even better. But we're talking 12% from the start of the financial year, which is just around the corner. If you can do that, it's a pretty cheap insurance policy, let's call it, that your future self will thank you for. And I think it's a really good discipline to get into from day one.
Tax benefits associated
100%.
with it.
Yep.
I mean, the equivalent of not paying superannuation is you deciding that, okay, it's not even equivalent. It's actually riskier. But a comparable scenario is you putting money towards super and just investing in one stock. You say this is the one stock that I'm going to invest in. That's the equivalent of what you're doing by not paying yourself superannuation and retaining all of the money in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So one is the superannuation side of things to, make sure that you're keeping that discipline up and that you're, maximizing, one, the tax efficiency, but two, some of the risk mitigation from a retirement planning perspective. But also, think about, how do I actually pull money out of this business? How do I convert my business assets to personal assets? Because you can kick the can down the road and you can, not do it until the point in time that you sell the business in 30 years' time or whenever that point in time is. But as Billy said, if that business valuation is no longer there, if you can't find the buyer, if AI comes in and disrupts that industry, if any number of things happen, you've put everything into that one asset and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, and another really big thing to consider in that same scenario is you put everything into that business, and a lot of these, smaller startup businesses, there's one person that's in that business. And all of a sudden, if something happens to you, any future projections on what that business would have looked like, any sale of that business in terms of valuation, all of that can be up in dust.
Gone.
And so all of a sudden your beneficiaries are left with a business that may have potential, but no physical asset at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what does your family then do when they're in a period of grieving? If you're permanently disabled, if you're injured, if you're sick. So what are your, maybe insurance policy considerations? How do you make sure that if all of these things happen, or if any of these things do happen, that not only you're protected, but also your family's finances are protected as well?
Geez, the more we unpack it, the more complex this side hustle thing gets, right? One of the other things that I want to put on the table is your income is going to be lumpy, at least at the start until you start to get traction. So when you're looking at all of this, you need to plan for it. So depending on what that is, which I guess goes back to the original point that we were saying, is if you can still do it while you're still working, the income piece is taken care of to meet your living expenses, and you can afford to have lumpy income, and it's not going to be as impactful and detrimental if it takes longer to get paid or you don't make the anticipated sales that you're expecting. So go into this eyes wide open with the expectation that your income is going to be lumpy, that it's going to take longer to earn than what you were projecting and hoping for, and set up some buffers, set up cash flow systems to be able to do that, because it's not going to be exactly as you expected. If anything, 9 times out of 10, that's just me making up statistics, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the money here. 9 times out of 10, it's going to take longer to get the money in the door than what you think.
And really, I mean, this is a good time as you're starting to make that transition to start to consider, okay, well, how do I actually reduce my personal living expenses? Because if your income is going to be lumpy, if you're going to have a potentially lower income than what you currently have when you're working in your day job, it can be a reset button, and it can be a button that you say, okay, I need to really drive down all of my personal expenditure. And so, a lot of people will do that and they'll, pull their expenditure back. But then all of a sudden, as the business income increases, then their lifestyle creep increases, and you're not actually capturing any of that. But use it as a, resetting of the ceiling and saying, okay, I managed to live with my expenses here.
Yep.
It didn't change my lifestyle. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. So why am I going to go back to, spending up here? Make sure that you're, resetting the standard, and that you're ultimately going to take advantage of, okay, great. As my income increases, I'm going to capture that. I'm going to use it to invest or reinvest back into the business or pay super or do all of these things that you should be considering.
Probably from my end, the last thing that I've got on the list is when you're doing your planning, I think plan for growth. Survival should not be the target that you're aiming for. It should not be just matching your workplace income. That might be a goal that you've got to achieve in a certain period of time, but you need to, if you're going to do this, you don't want to be in a position where you're buying yourself a job, so you're just replacing your income. For a few people, that might be the goal and that might be the objective because it gives them more freedom. But I tell you what, for the effort and the sacrifice that you put in, you're going to want to get more out than what you've been getting by giving that skill set to, say, your employer.
Yeah.
So plan for growth rather than planning for survival. Set yourself revenue goals. Set yourself milestones that you want to try and hit. Lean into tools that are available to make you more efficient, to make you more valuable to potential customers. Make sure you've got, the idea and the concept that you want to grow and bring people on board, because that's how you grow and scale a business. And think long term, but just think big.
Yeah.
And then when you think big, double it and then double it again. Like, just think big.
And understand that, if you're going into something like this, particularly if you're in that scenario, which, look, we're financial advisors, and, how we operate our business, that's our concept of, doing and striving for more. But expect that you're no longer at some point in time going to be doing the work that it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, let's say you're a graphic designer.
Yep.
Okay, you work for someone, you're a graphic designer, you earn an income, you develop this side hustle to be a graphic designer, but work for yourself to give yourself, more income opportunity and to give yourself more flexibility and all of that stuff. And when you first start off, you're going to be a graphic designer.
Yep.
But as you grow that business, and as there's now, 3, 4, 5, 10, 50, 100 people that are all working for you, now you're not a graphic designer. Yes, maybe you do some graphic design, and maybe that's still a part of your job, but now you're also a CEO, you're a CFO, you're a strategic officer, your HR, your payroll, your tax, your running a business is running a business.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what industry that you're in, you still need to run that business. So don't go into it unless you are just trying to, buy yourself a job and you are just trying to, replace an income. Go into it knowing that, hey, I'm doing this to be in business, not to do the skill that I currently have. Because if you're just doing the skill that you currently have, then either you're hiring and there needs to be a huge amount of trust and cost that's associated with all of these things that a lot of small businesses don't have, or you're doing one thing well and failing on all of the other things.
Yep. Andrew, makes me want to go out and start a side hustle. hearing all of this stuff, but no, look, I reckon we covered
up and excited.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I reckon we covered some good ground. Hopefully, there's a whole heap of value for everybody listening and watching this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, this is something that we love. This is something that we love to see our clients do, and this is something that we love to participate in as well. So, if you do have any questions, if you do want any assistance, please feel free to reach out to either Billy or myself. Details are in the show notes. Like, subscribe, share the episode, and we look forward to catching you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of Acumen Financial Planning Proprietary Limited.